I arrived at the office that Thursday morning and felt the shift immediately. Jordan Ellis's desk sat empty in the far corner of the operations floor, the one tucked beside the humming auxiliary servers that most people ignored. His chair was pushed in neatly, almost too neatly, like someone had deliberately erased any sign he'd ever been there. Jordan never pushed his chair in. 11 years maintaining the backbone of Vanguard Innovations, and he always left it slightly askew. A quiet marker that he was coming back. Not today. His login was gone from the internal directory. Badge deactivated. No goodbye email. No box of personal items by the elevator. Just a sterile note from HR in the company Slack. Strategic realignment in progress. Derek Lang, our new Chief Technology Officer, had pushed the changes through fast after his arrival from a flashy Bay Area startup. Derek loved phrases like cloud-native scalability and disruptive modernization. He said them with a confident California drawl during his first all-hands, pacing the conference room like he was unveiling the future. Legacy code? Technical debt. Dead weight dragging us down. He didn't name Jordan specifically, but everyone knew who he meant, the guy who'd kept the old mainframe integrations alive. The permission layers that still handled our most sensitive regulatory data. The quiet architect who'd patched systems during hurricanes when the generators faltered and the ticketing queue overflowed. Jordan had sat through that onboarding meeting with his usual calm. Hands folded. Expression unreadable. No raised voice. No defense. Just that steady gaze. Like he was watching a kid swing a hammer at a foundation he himself had poured years ago. I remember the chill in my spine when Derek laughed about streamlining the old guard. Jordan didn't flinch. He simply nodded once and returned to his terminal. By midday, the floor felt different. Colder. Despite the usual hum of air conditioning, Jordan had never been loud. But his presence was gravitational. You noticed it only after it vanished. Derek's hand-picked contractors arrived in hoodies and sneakers, tossing around terms like zero-trust architecture and agile sprints while ripping through Jordan's meticulously commented documentation. They treated it like outdated notes, deleting old audit trails without backups. Derek didn't believe in redundant systems. He believed in speed, in moving fast and breaking things, as if the phrase itself excused any fallout. I walked past the auxiliary access panel near the sublevel exit later that afternoon. It was an old wall-mounted reader, dusty and unmarked, the kind interns mistook for a forgotten thermostat. The status light blinked green, not the usual idle amber. Someone had authenticated recently using credentials the new system shouldn't recognize. That slow, deep unease settled in my stomach. The kind that whispers you've overlooked something critical. Something moving quietly beneath the surface. The restructuring announcement came from the rooftop lounge. Derek holding court with espresso in hand, talking vertical integration and adaptive pivoting while employees below packed boxes in silence. Jordan's name wasn't on the initial layoff list. That made it sting more. At 2 p.m., he was still logged in, working steadily on a compliance migration only he fully understood. No complaints, no questions when his 5-person team disappeared before lunch. The Outlook invite came at 2:37 p.m., HR conference room. 3 o'clock sharp. Jordan stood slowly, adjusted his collar, left his coffee half-finished and his terminal unlocked. Security escorted him out before 4 p.m. No scene. No protest. He paused briefly by that same auxiliary reader on his way past the hallway, hand brushing his coat pocket. The logs later showed an anomaly, an access event under a legacy credential string dormant for years. The system hadn't flagged it. Jordan had once told me, years back during a late-night outage, always keep one small thing offline. Something they can't touch. Enough to restart if everything burns. I'd assumed he meant a notebook or encrypted USB. I didn't realize he meant himself, the living archive of our infrastructure. The office wiped him clean in under 90 minutes. Badge dead. Slack deactivated mid-thread. Terminal reassigned. But the servers? They remembered. The permission hierarchies. The emergency rollback protocols. The old sync layers powering our compliance sandbox, those answered only to him in ways the new architecture never fully mapped. Derek strutted around claiming victory over inefficiency, oblivious that the grid beneath his modern dashboards was still Jordan's. I stayed late that night, checking logs out of habit. The building emptied. Lights dimmed. But the servers hummed on. Somewhere in the auxiliary layer, a quiet pulse remained. Not destructive. Just waiting. The kind of silence that precedes a reckoning. Jordan didn't head home after they walked him out. Home was traceable. Too exposed under the company's lingering surveillance policies. Instead, he drove downtown to a nondescript co-working space wedged between a pet supply store and a coffee roaster in Chicago's West Loop. Concrete walls. Unreliable Wi-Fi. Cash-only policy. No questions asked if you paid up front and kept headphones on. He chose a dim corner booth with a flickering outlet and unpacked an older ThinkPad, scuffed from years of personal use, unlinked from any corporate network. From his coat pocket, he produced a small black drive, unlabeled, wrapped in RF shielding mesh inside an old Altoids tin. The drive held compressed mirrors of Vanguard's permission matrix from 2 years prior, stripped, sanitized, but functionally intact. Buried beneath decoy folders labeled personal taxes and old project notes sat a single script, quarterly reindex lock, PY. Jordan had written it long ago as an audit tool to repair corrupted access tags after major patches. It ran automatically on the legacy reset cycle. Grandfathered in with root privileges, no one had bothered to revoke. It wasn't built for harm. It cleaned. It restored order. But Jordan fed it new parameters that night, a subtle inversion. Restricted files would have their visibility flags quietly rewritten to internal indexable. 1-bit flip. Executed through orphaned legacy handlers the cloud dashboards ignored. He tested it 3 times in an isolated sandbox. Clean every time. No alarms triggered. He worked methodically, fingers steady despite the weight of the day. The co-working space emptied around him as sunset faded. Jordan encrypted the payload, embedded it in the drive's boot partition, then slipped the tin back into his coat, the same one he'd worn during his exit. It still carried faint traces of solder flux and server room dust. He left before dark, unseen. But he wasn't finished. Around 10 p.m., Jordan returned to Vanguard's building through the loading dock blind spot, the auxiliary hallway with no active cameras. Just old wiring and forgotten purpose. The reader waited, flush against concrete, loyal and dusty. He connected the drive using a custom analog adapter he'd assembled years earlier for redundancy drills. Bare hands, measured breath. The reader blinked once, twice, then held steady green. The legacy shell awoke after years of dormancy. Jordan didn't force anything. He wrote a conditional trigger: if no manual override arrives during the quarterly reset window, initiate cascade. The trigger relied on absence. Derek's arrogance ensured no one monitored the old layer. He set a 3-hour delay buffer. Enough time for anomalies to be noticed and cancelled, if anyone cared to look. This wasn't revenge in the explosive sense. It was a test of vigilance, of whether memory still mattered in a place that prized disruption over continuity. Logs populated slowly on the reader interface. Sync handshake complete. Cascade condition queued. Jordan disconnected the drive, folded his coat over his arm, and walked away without looking back. The building's night systems took over, indifferent and humming. Meanwhile, the office above slept unaware. Derek's team had celebrated the clean slate with rooftop drinks, toasting the death of legacy overhead. Interns joked about the dusty auxiliary reader being a museum piece. No one touched it. No one even knew its full capabilities anymore. Jordan's absence registered as just another corporate casualty, efficient, bloodless, forward-moving. But at midnight, the quarterly maintenance cycle initiated exactly as scheduled for over a decade. The senior overnight engineer, sipping vending machine coffee, watched routine progress bars crawl across dual monitors, disk defrags, log rotations, index rebuilds. Nothing unusual on the surface dashboards. Beneath the glossy cloud interfaces Derek loved showcasing, older bones stirred. The cascade began not with fanfare, but with a subtle tide, permissions rebalanced across mirrored caches. Restricted flags lifted one by one. No crashes, no alerts, just exposure. By 3 a.m., thousands of documents shifted quietly into searchable internal indexes. Board memos, once marked executive only. Suppressed audit findings. Vendor contracts revealing unapproved side deals. Financial reconciliations hidden during Derek's onboarding. An internal investigation into an $800,000 procurement irregularity Derek had personally postponed now surfaced in shared team folders. The log entries repeated a single embedded string, admin override via legacy, keycard .01. The night tech noticed nothing amiss until the early hours. The system behaved as if these permissions had always been open. Morning arrived with the scent of burnt coffee and rising panic. It started small, one confused Slack message in the legal channel. Why is the Q3 deferred compliance draft showing up in the intern drive? No immediate reply. Then finance lit up. These payout logs, are they supposed to be visible? Marketing followed. Anyone else seeing restricted vendor contracts? By 9:05 a.m., the floor froze. Screens filled with files no one should access. Whistleblower notes in compliance reports. Off-cycle executive bonuses buried in obsolete department folders. Drafts of SEC correspondence never meant for broad eyes. The indexer replicated metadata relentlessly, deleting one link spawned 6 more. It felt like mopping an ocean with tissues. IT scrambled to trace the source. All paths led to the same haunting entry in permission logs, EDHJL legacy, keycard .01. No matching current badge protocol. No IP trace. No admin session flagged. The string predated Derek's entire tenure. Rooted in code Jordan Ellis had hard-coded years earlier for outage resilience. To the servers, it wasn't a breach. It was Jordan simply coming home. Panic spread via DMs and emergency calendar invites. Legal flagged files for deletion. But the cascade had already mirrored everything across redundant caches. A junior analyst ran deeper traces and found the trigger scheduled weeks prior through the forgotten legacy layer, ignored because non-essential per Derek's directives. Derek was unreachable at first. Calendar marked remote client meetings, phone to voicemail. When he finally appeared, his tie sat crooked, face pale. The executive floor turned into whispered chaos, doors open, people pacing with printed documents. The VP of Operations confronted the CEO. This doesn't feel like an external leak. It feels deliberate, surgical. By 9:50 a.m., a pale board assistant delivered a printed 6-month-old internal audit flagging procurement risks tied directly to Derek's early decisions. Risk exposure over $2.5 million. Escalation postponed by CTO directive. Derek had buried it. Now it breathed in the open. The board convened in the half-lit executive room. No slides. No refreshments, just tension thick enough to choke on. Derek sat stiffly. Laptop closed. The general counsel spoke first. Voice measured but eyes darting. No external breach indicators. No foreign IPs. The system treated these permission changes as legitimate legacy behavior. She slid log excerpts across the table. Page after page echoed the same string. Admin override initiated. Source: Legacy, keycard .01. Derek tried deflecting. This is spoofed metadata. Some insider in IT stirring trouble. I'll bring forensics in. The CFO cut him off sharply. That string isn't spoofed. It's Jordan Ellis's legacy handler. He built the auxiliary safeguards against exactly this kind of oversight. Silence fell heavier. The risk director reviewed the entries again. These aren't recent injections. The code paths haven't been touched since last year. This was queued long before today, triggered by absence of override. We stopped watching the old layer. The realization settled like cold concrete. The man they'd erased quietly, mocked as outdated, replaced with contractors who couldn't navigate the full stack, had never truly left. From beneath the radar, he'd watched and acted. The CMO exhaled sharply. You assured us everything was revoked. Derek's response faltered. It looks like he revoked visibility on us instead. By afternoon, whispers turned to open questions about ethics, procurement irregularities, suppressed audits. Investors demanded calls. Compliance teams worked frantically, but every deletion attempt multiplied the exposure. Nothing was destroyed, just revealed. The surgical precision left no doubt. Jordan had tested the waters of memory and found the company lacking. The following Thursday, Derek Lang's name vanished from the org chart with clinical precision. No announcement. No farewell Slack post, just calendar cancellations and meetings relabeled, internal review only. Officially listed as administrative leave. But the phrase was never spoken aloud. The hallways grew quieter. Conversations clipped. New policies circulated. Mandatory legacy audits. Full deprovisioning verification. Badge reviews. HR ran awkward workshops on operational resilience. But the damage lingered in every unsaid glance. The auxiliary reader still pulsed soft green every few seconds near the sublevel hallway. A heartbeat no one dared touch. Facilities quietly asked if the old backup server had ever been fully wiped. No answers came. The exposure hadn't crashed systems or stolen funds. It had simply lifted veils on truths the company preferred buried: favoritism in contracts, postponed ethics reviews, metrics inflated for board presentations. Derek's modernization had blinded leadership to the very safeguards keeping integrity intact. Jordan's cascade forced a mirror. I sat in the dim cafe near the riverfront that Monday evening, nursing coffee that tasted metallic. The place had cracked brick walls and a single taped power strip, anonymous. Unremarkable. Jordan sat in the back corner. Hood low, glasses perched, terminal booting slowly. No triumph in his posture, just quiet resolution. He checked background logs through a secure tunnel. The pings had slowed but still echoed occasionally. Admin override via legacy, keycard .01. Not dangerous now. The core files were scrubbed by legal teams desperate to regain control. But metadata persisted in forgotten nodes. Jordan tapped a final sequence, nulling the credential string. The system hesitated, then complied. Silence fell. No more echoes. An unread email waited in his clean inbox from a rival firm that had tried recruiting him years earlier. Heard what happened at Vanguard. We'd value your expertise. Coffee. Jordan smiled faintly, tired but unburdened. No celebration. No gloating. The scales had evened. It was never purely about payback. It was about being acknowledged by the machine he'd built and nurtured. They erased him at 4:30 p.m. But at midnight, the server still whispered his name. He closed the laptop, finished his coffee, and stepped into the Chicago evening. The city moved on, indifferent. But somewhere in the code of countless systems, quiet architects like Jordan remained, foundations beneath flashy surfaces. Waiting for the moment absence reveals their enduring power. What lingered longest wasn't the scandal or the firings. It was the question hanging over every late-night server room hum, when we rush to bury the past in pursuit of the new. Do we ever truly escape it, or does it simply wait? Patient and precise. Until we remember too late who laid the first stones? The weeks after the cascade brought deeper reckonings across Vanguard. Legal teams spent endless hours redacting and reclassifying. But the initial breach had already seeded doubt in every stakeholder conversation. Board members demanded independent audits dating back 5 years. Compliance rolled out stricter legacy protocols, ironically validating Jordan's original designs they'd once dismissed. Employees moved through the office with cautious glances, hyper-aware of permissions and share drives. The contractors Derek had championed quietly departed as trust eroded. The CEO addressed the company in a subdued all-hands, "We are strengthening our foundations." No mention of the man whose foundations they'd ignored. I visited the auxiliary hallway one final evening. The reader no longer blinked green. The pulse had stopped after Jordan's remote null command. The system had accepted its closure with the same stoic logic it applied to every process. Jordan never returned to the building. No forwarding address shared. No social media traces. No loose ends. He resurfaced months later in industry forums under a low profile, consulting for firms valuing deep infrastructure knowledge over hype cycles. The rival company that emailed him extended an offer he accepted quietly. Derek's departure became corporate legend in hushed tones, proof that disruption without respect for roots invites collapse. His LinkedIn updated to advising early-stage startups on scalable architecture, but the damage to his reputation followed like a shadow. The moral weight settled differently for each of us who remained. Some saw justice in the exposure of buried irregularities. Others felt unease at how easily a single overlooked credential could upend an empire. The real lesson wasn't technological, it was human. Arrogance in modernization blinded us to the quiet competence holding everything together. We treated people like disposable code, only to discover the code remembered everything. In the end, the servers didn't seek revenge. They simply enforced order as designed. Jordan had built them to endure, to reveal when vigilance failed. His final act was a reminder: the past isn't dead weight. It's the unseen architecture supporting every bold leap forward. And on quiet nights, when the office hums with indifferent machinery, you can still feel it, that slow-building tension. The dreading realization that some ghosts write the rules long after they've been shown the door. The question echoes softly: how many other Jordans walk among us, carrying master keys in their pockets, waiting for silence to trigger truth?